only thing that gon' be normal is distribution. Normal folks gon' infuse some. Optimize your lineups and you feed the rest, you mute them. Turning it up, these numbers are loud. Peeping this game from a nimbus is wild. Making it rain. While I embrace all this risk, I'm insane. Talking about that best bill, I'm the best rest till into the next world. Guess I got next still. Best bill, I'm the best rest till into the next world.
And welcome into the Best Bell Fantasy Football Podcast and live stream. My name is Bradley Stalder, and I'm happy that you're joining me tonight. We're going to talk some Week 15 stardom sit-ems, expert rankings, give you some advice for what to do, how to prepare. We've got games tomorrow. We've got 3 Saturday games, a 1 p.m., 4 p.m., and 8 p.m., I believe. And so the 1 o'clock game, Indianapolis travels to Minnesota. The 4:30 game, Baltimore travels to Cleveland. And the 8:15 game, Miami travels to Buffalo. It's going to be a lot of fun because there's no college football, so there's going to be NFL this Saturday, tomorrow, here in a couple hours. It's going to be a lot of fun. So let's drop some start-sit questions as we're getting ready for Week 15. And if you like the content, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button. Today we eclipsed the 500 subscriber threshold, so appreciate all of you jumping in. It's a lot of fun sharing with you, being in this community, discussing fantasy football, all things fantasy football. Appreciate all of you. Serendipity Trick Shots, sup Serendipity Trick Shots. Appreciate you jumping on in. Kareem Baldwin from YouTube, Chris Moore or Gabe Davis? Wow. Whew. Starting off with a spicy one. The fact that we have to talk about Gabe Davis in this light is all you need to know. Because Gabe Davis, over the last 4 games, has finished no better than the wide receiver 32. And I mean, 6 of the last 7 games, Gabe Davis has finished no better than the wide receiver 32. So it has been tough sledding coming off the Jets, 3 for 31. Miami is a difficult defense to score fantasy points on. He's the consensus wide receiver 30 for this week. And the Buffalo Bills have a negative 28 pass block advantage per PFF. So I wonder if, anything can happen. That's the thing, is if you're putting Gabe Davis and you're banking on, I'm just throwing a dart, taking a shot on a 50-yard touchdown. That's what you're doing with Gabe Davis right now. He is not really a PPR option. I mean, look at his targets over the last few games, 7, 5, 7, and 4. But you're like, okay, 7, 5, 7, and 4. He only catches like 50% of his passes. So we're really talking about 5, 4, 2, and 3 receptions. And even before that, he had 6 receptions against Minnesota. But before that, right, Gabe Davis has only 2 games this season where he has more than 4 receptions. So I don't know if you can fire up Gabe Davis with any sort of confidence at all. Whereas, I need to do some updates on my rankings because there are a lot of players who are ruled out. But looking for Chris Moore. Yeah, there's a lot of Chris Moore. Chris Moore right now gets Kansas City, 4th most points allowed to wide receivers. And Chris Moore has finished last week as the wide receiver 9. We had also seen a wide receiver 17 finish against Philadelphia, who's a tough defense. And the formula for Chris Moore is no Brandon Cooks. No Brandon Cooks. And there was no Nico Collins in this game either. So, you're going to think that Chris Moore is going to get some fantasy points. Right now, he's the consensus wide receiver 47. I mean, you're probably starting Gabe Davis still over Chris Moore, but the fact that we have to have this conversation means that you need to move up Chris Moore very, very significantly, right? I think he needs to be in that wide receiver 4 conversation, and Gabe Davis's floor is lower than Chris Moore, I think. So if you just need some points, I would say go with Chris Moore. But if you are like a 20-point deficit type of matchup this week and you need a player to go off, I think the player to go off who has a higher ceiling is Gabe Davis. So I think this is dependent upon what you need. And that's as terrible as it sounds because Gabe Davis was like a back end third round pick for fantasy drafts this past year. So yikes. Sorry, everyone. Kareem Baldwin, also AJ Dillon, ETN Swift pick 2. I'm going to go ETN and Swift. That was an easy one, Kareem. And then Rachaad White or ETN. I'm still going to go ETN because I know that Travis Etienne is going to get all of the work. I know that it's a tough matchup against Dallas. Dallas Cowboys give up the 4th fewest fantasy points to the running back position. They're the 6th toughest rush DVOA. And the Dallas Cowboys defensive line have a 48% run block advantage over the Jacksonville Jaguars offensive line projected per PFF. So I mean, let's look at Rachaad White. There's really not any metric on one side or the other that indicates that it's a strong or weak matchup for Rachaad White. It's just that he's splitting touches with Leonard Fournette. So I'm going with the volume play here. I think I'm going to lean with the volume for Travis Etienne. Kathy Marshak, Kirk Cousins, or Justin Fields? And this is a valid question too, because I've moved up Kirk Cousins in my rankings. Kirk Cousins right now is my quarterback 9. He's at home against Indy. His consensus 8, and he's finished as the quarterback 9 2 of the last 3 games. Okay, he did that against New England. He had 3 touchdowns. He finished as the quarterback 25 2 weeks ago against the Jets. And then against the Detroit Lions, quarterback 5, he threw for 425 passing yards. I am not as optimistic as my peers. He's the expert consensus quarterback 8. And it's because of the Isaiah Rodgers treatment, right? Isaiah Rodgers is one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. He shuts down opposing wide receivers. And so that's why I'm fading Adam Thielen in this game. Like Justin Jefferson is going to get his. Let's not put it 2 ways. But Kirk Cousins is not one that I'm going to play over Justin Fields, even though Fields, gets Philadelphia this week, and Fields has been sick. And the Philadelphia defense is not an easy task. They allow the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. They're the 2nd most difficult passing DVOA matchup. And the Philadelphia Eagles have a 32% pass block advantage projected by PFF over the Chicago Bears offensive line. But it's about the rushing for me. It's about the rushing, and Kirk Cousins doesn't have a plus matchup. So give me Fields with the rushing. His floor is just going to be higher. Justin Fields has finished as the quarterback 8 every week since and including week 6 against Washington. So you're firing up Justin Fields as a top 7 quarterback this week. Kirk Cousins is my quarterback 9 for right now. Omar Rios. Start 1, flex 1, sit 2. Okay, so I'm picking 2. DPJ, Amari Cooper, Hubbard, and Elijah Moore. Man, this is a lot of grossness, Omar. Woof. DPJ, Amari Cooper. I'm not trusting Amari Cooper, so he's going to be one that I sit. Because Amari Cooper, over the last 2 weeks, has finished as the wide receiver 55 and 59. And he's had 16 targets during that time. It's not like he hasn't been involved. But there's been rustiness from Deshaun Watson. Amari Cooper's been dealing with a pretty noticeable hip injury. He's been limited to no more than 42 receiving yards and no more than 4 receptions and no more than 6 fantasy points in both of those games against Houston and Cincinnati, who give up some of the fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver position. So you're not firing up Amari Cooper this week. Now, Elijah Moore is a sneaky pick, but we just saw Zach Wilson is going to get the start. So that's a little volatile. So I think it's going to come down to DPJ, Hubbard, Elijah Moore. Let's look at Hubbard here. And Chuba Hubbard gets Pittsburgh. And the Baltimore Ravens were able to move the ball pretty well against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I think this was an anomaly game. Seattle gives up some of the most fancy points to running backs. And Hubbard went 14 for 74. He had the touchdown, 3 receptions for 25 yards, finished as the running back 10 last week. But this was a season high. And before, over the last 2 games, 17 and 14 carries. And again, in the Tampa Bay game, before he went out, Hubbard 9 carries for 63 yards. So he's played pretty well. I would say in like a standard league or a half PPR league, he might be a little interesting. But if I'm looking at who could hit the nuts, who could just you just get some spike weeks out of, I think you're looking at Donovan Peoples-Jones and Elijah Moore. Those are my 2 picks for this week. I am really concerned about Amari Cooper's hip, and Chuba Hubbard, as I said, gets a difficult matchup. And I still think Donta Foreman's going to play ahead of him. So that's how I would lean Omar Rios. Would you trust Goddard or Waller coming off the IR in week 15? If so, who's the better option? Trust is a strong word here come the fantasy playoffs. Do I trust them? Not really. I don't know what kind of snaps the coaching staff wants to give them. But if I am picking between Dallas Goedert and Darren Waller, I'm going to go with Dallas Goedert. Waller is older. He's coming off the hamstring injuries, which are injuries that tend to recur, especially if you're an older player. Dallas Goedert is younger, and it was clear that he was, made his progressions through. So Dallas Goedert had already been doing well before the injury, but Waller had been more inconsistent. I would trust the better offense, the more consistent offense, if I had to pick one, Dallas Goedert or Darren Waller. All right, if y'all like the content, make sure you hit that red subscribe button. And also, I'm answering your start sit questions here. Throw them in the chat. I appreciate all of you. Newly subscribed. We just eclipsed the 500 subscriber mark for the channel. So I appreciate all of you. This has been a lot of fun this year. This has been a lot of fun. So I appreciate y'all jumping in, being into this and supporting each other in this community as we continue to grow. Mark Folkman, Burks is probably going to be out. Actually, Treylon Burks was already ruled out. So that is official. Drake London, Ben Skowronek, or Elijah Moore. Whoo, baby. Okay, so you're not going to start Ben Skowronek. I made a video about that a couple days ago, and Skowronek is supposed to get the Jair Alexander treatment, and he is the only wide receiver per PFF that has a projected 0% wide receiver cornerback advantage. So the way PFF grades it is 100% to 0%, and 50% is like average. Like it could go one way, it could go the other. Ben Skowronek is the only 0%er this week. So you're not firing up Ben Skowronek. It's just I don't see it. Even if you're going to have a good target share from Skowronek, okay? So it then comes down to Elijah Moore or Drake London. And right now, Drake London is the wide receiver consensus 36. And Drake London was the wide receiver 22 last week, or the last time he played in week 13 against Pittsburgh. 12 targets, 6 receptions, 95 yards. Drake London has 4 touchdowns on the season. He hasn't scored since week 11 against Chicago, where he went 1 catch for 2 yards in the touchdown. And finished as the wide receiver 47 despite having a touchdown. So I am concerned about that. The New Orleans offense is not one that really, it gives me reason to think it's going to be tough or it's going to be an easy matchup. And let me pull up the DraftKings. There we go. I'm going to look at the over-unders for this game as well, because maybe that'll glean some more light. I don't anticipate this to be a shootout at all. Yeah, the over-under is 43.5. The Saints are favored by 4 points at home. So I'm not super bullish on Drake London. If I'm taking a shot, I'm taking a shot on Elijah Moore just due to Elijah Moore's target share that he's been increasing. His routes that he's been running. I've been very, very impressed with that. And where did Elijah? Someone has been messing with my rankings, I swear, because I definitely moved Elijah Moore up. He's finished as the wide receiver 36 or better 2 of the last 3 weeks. He's had at least 60 receiving yards 2 of the last 3 weeks. He's had 6 or more targets 2 of the last 3 weeks. So Elijah Moore, had 7, 5, and 9 targets during the first 3 weeks where he played with Joe Flacco, with Zach Wilson recovering from the injury. So Joe Flacco is not going to be the starter. It's going to be Zach Wilson. But I wonder if, this is one of those trap games, because Detroit does give up the 3rd most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. So if I'm taking a shot, I'm taking a shot on Elijah Moore. We have Desmond Ridder making his starting debut for the Atlanta Falcons as well. So all of those things combined, I think I'm still going to go with Elijah Moore, even with the Zach Wilson downgrade. There you go. Okay. DPJ, Waddle, Higgins, or Brown. Yeah, it's I don't know which Brown it is. I assume I don't AJ Brown, because if it's AJ Brown, we're going with AJ Brown. But if it's Amon-Ra, I mean, we're also going with Amon-Ra. Let me see. Are there any other Browns? Marquise Brown. It might be Marquise Brown. So Waddle, Higgins, or Marquise Brown. And, Higgins is coming off that hamstring injury where he disappeared. But Jalen Waddle, only 9 targets over the last 2 games. He's been dealing with an injury. Only 3 receptions during that time, only 40 yards. It's Buffalo, and the Buffalo defense is usually pretty tough. This weather in Buffalo is supposed to be really, really bad. So I don't know if you can fire up Jalen Waddle with a lot of confidence. Like, the Cincinnati Bengals get Tampa Bay. And if T. Higgins is a full go, which he was a full go in practice this week, this could be a really, really interesting secondary to torch. Like Jamar Chase, for instance, has a 97% advantage versus this Tampa Bay secondary per PFF. So I know T. Higgins, is viewed as maybe not as good, but still he's in that high end wide receiver 2, low end wide receiver 1 conversation. And I think that you've got a tier here. You've got Waddle and Higgins, but I think I'm going to lean Higgins because he's been healthy. And then Marquise, so it's clear it's Waddle and Higgins. And then the Marquise Brown, Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think I'm going to move DPJ over Marquise Brown due to the Denver matchup, but it's close because Denver gives up the 2nd fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver position and then the 3rd toughest pass DVOA matchup. So I think we're going to go with Higgins, Waddle, Brown, then DPJ. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Godwin, or Chris Moore. I need 2. Yeah, you're always going to start Amon-Ra St. Brown. As Mark Folkman will put in the chat later, you're starting the Sun God, even though the Jets give up the 3rd fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver position. Amon-Ra St. Brown is not going to get the Sauce Gardner treatment. I don't know where y'all are hearing this, but Amon-Ra is pretty much safe. Amon-Ra St. Brown runs between 60 and 70% of his routes out of the slot. Sauce Gardner does not play the slot wide receivers. He's not going to line up against him. You're fading DJ Chark this week. You're fading Josh Reynolds this week. You're fading you're fading Jameson Williams this week. You're fading all the Khalif Raymonds of the world. You're fading those players. You are not fading Amon-Ra St. Brown this week. Don't do it. Do not overlook it. Chris Godwin has been a target hog for Tampa Bay. He's the consensus wide receiver 16, and I just can't wrap my mind around it. He went 12 for 110 and a touchdown in week 12 against Cleveland. He went 8 for 63 on 13 targets against New Orleans, which is a tough defense, and 5 for 54 on 9 targets against really tough San Francisco secondary. Cincinnati, yes, they do not give up a ton of fantasy points to the wide receiver position, but they're losing parts of their secondary in preparation for week 15. Some of them have been ruled out. So I think that this is an interesting possible matchup for Chris Godwin. I don't think Chris Moore gets into the St. Brown Godwin conversation at this point. So, yeah, I think they're both clearly tiers ahead of Chris Moore, even though, we like Chris Moore as a sleeper for this week. Yeah, as Mark says, is always a must start. All right. Triple X Lex, Swift, Dobbins, Brian Robinson, Donta Foreman, Marquise Brown. I need 2. All right. Well, we're starting Dobbins. We are starting J.K. Dobbins. This is my start of the week. If I'm picking a start of the week, it's J.K. Dobbins. I'm bullish. I've put my money where my mouth is, or at least my rankings where my mouth is. I moved J.K. Dobbins into the top 12 of running backs in my rankings for this week. He's the consensus running back 22 as of yesterday. Let's see if he's moved up at all. J.K. Dobbins for Fantasy Pros. Yep, still the running back 22, which doesn't make sense because he's coming off a 15 for 120 and 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then he gets the Cleveland Browns, who allow the 3rd most fantasy points and are the 3rd best rushing matchup DVOA. You're firing up J.K. Dobbins this week. You absolutely are. Now a little bit more of a challenge are how are you going to fit the rest of those in? And I think you're going to have to go with some DeAndre Swift because I don't see any of the others. Like I'm going with Swift over Robinson. I'm going with Swift over Foreman, and Marquise Brown is a fade for me this week. So you're going to go with Dobbins and Swift, in my opinion. So there we go. Yeah. Triple X Lex. That's how I would value it. Marquise Brown's Denver matchup is just too difficult. Foreman's going to get the touches, but we've also already talked about Chuba Hubbard getting a significant amount of rush as well over the last couple games. I don't think that goes away a ton. Okay. Montgomery, Rashad White, Dobbins, Damian Harris need 3. Well, once again, we're starting J.K. Dobbins. We're starting Rashad White. And I think we're starting David Montgomery. This is the last week where we can confidently say start David Montgomery because next week we might have Khalil Herbert back. So just a forewarning, if Khalil Herbert is on your waiver wire, go check it out. Go pick up Khalil Herbert. Garrett Wilson or Scary Terry. And if you would have asked me 24 hours ago, I would have said, are you nuts? You're not starting Terry McLaurin over Garrett Wilson. But here we are. Here we are. Terry McLaurin has a good matchup this week. He has a PFF projected wide receiver cornerback advantage of 93%. And the Washington Commanders, last time that they played the Giants, he went 8 for 105 and 1. McLaurin finishes the wide receiver 8, 12 targets for McLaurin in that game. It was Taylor Heineke. Yes, Carson Wentz is activated off of IR, but it's still, Taylor Heineke's show for as long as we can handle it. And then let's talk about Garrett Wilson. So Garrett Wilson, has dropped down from, well, I guess I'm a little low. He's still consensus wide receiver 11. And we had seen some games where Garrett Wilson played all right. He was wide receiver 6 with Flacco. He was wide receiver 8 in that New England game where Zach Wilson did terrible. He went 6 for 115, 8 for 92, and 7 rushing yards as well. So I think that you're valuing Garrett Wilson as a pretty mid-range wide receiver 2, but Terry McLaurin has a lot more upside. So if you're playing it safe, you go with Garrett Wilson. I think he's going to get a better and more secure target share. I think things are going to go more right. But Terry McLaurin has, I think, the higher upside in this game at Washington. So that's how I would value it. Depends on what you need. But I see them in a similar tier for this week. All right, everyone. So if you like my content, make sure you hit that red subscribe button. It really helps the channel. Vito from YouTube, David Njoku or Pat Freiermuth, full PPR. We're firing up David Njoku this week. David Njoku is my tight end 2 on the week. I have it Kelsey, Njoku, and then I moved Kittle up from tight end 5 to tight end 3. So that looks good because, I moved him up because Seattle allows the second most points to the tight end position, and Kittle had a 17% advantage per PFF. The average or the middle percentage is 0% for tight end linebacker matchups. So Kittle had a 17% advantage plus 17, and then it was just an overall good matchup. So I'm bullish on Njoku, though, because it's the Ravens. And Mark Cooper has been struggling. We've seen Njoku hit some ceiling games. Week 14 against Cincinnati, 7 for 59. He had the touchdown on 9 targets. Week 3 against Pittsburgh, he went 9 for 89 and a touchdown on 10 targets. He was the tight end 2 that week. And then the last time he played Baltimore, 7 for 71, 7 targets, finished as the tight end 5. So give me David Njoku. Pat Freiermuth is my tight end 7 this week. So still not a bad start, in my opinion, against Carolina. Because Freiermuth has finished as the tight end 8 and tight end 6 the last 2 weeks. I mean, last week against Baltimore, he finished as the tight end 6. So David Njoku now gets Baltimore. So you tell me. But I'm going with Njoku there. All right, B. Silva from YouTube. Appreciate you. I have an extra spot to grab, but not to play. Madison, James Cook, Patterson, Damian Harris, Warren, Chuba. These are all handcuffs to players I don't have, for the exception of Foreman. Full PPR. Yeah, so we're going to try to pick one with the highest upside, and I think the highest upside handcuff here is still Alexander Madison. Alexander Madison. We're talking Alexander Madison. Damian Harris is probably going to top out at 40% snap share. Cordarrelle Patterson, man, oh man, he has fallen off a cliff. James Cook, yeah, he could hit, but Devin Singletary is not going to go down. Unless Singletary goes down with an injury, it's going to be James Cook, or it's going to be, it's going to be Singletary leading the backfield unless the games are blown out. But we've seen Madison be a mid-pack running back 1, and he looks like he just has more juice than Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook does not look like he has a lot of juice. So if Cook somehow gets injured, it's Alexander Madison time, baby. And the Vikings offense gets into a lot of shootouts. Their secondary is really bad. So you could see Madison being a useful PPR play. You could see Madison getting a lot of goal line work. But ultimately, that's how I would play it right here. I'm not as interested in others. Give me Madison over those other handcuffs. Okay, Kenneth Walker, Christian Watson, Jerry Jeudy are rotating at the flex. Who would I feel more confident as a flex rest of season? I was just talking with BFFL, EJ, if you want to follow him on Twitter. And I was talking about, or we were talking about Green Bay Packers stuff, and Christian Watson's name came up, and EJ brought up how Romeo Doubs was going to come back and going to play a lot on the outside. I'm not confident in Doubs making any significant dent into Christian Watson's snaps or workload. Like Watson already 6 or more targets each of the last 4 weeks. He's had 48 or more receiving yards each of the last 4 weeks. 2 of those over 100 receiving yards, right? He's had 8 touchdowns over the last 4 games. And we've seen Aaron Rodgers hyper target particular players in the end zone or the red zone or deep. And Christian Watson has just been hitting as of late. So I think you're firing up Christian Watson here. You already had to either start or sit Kenneth Walker, and I advised y'all to like start Jerick McKinnon over Kenneth Walker, and that's probably going to come true. Kenneth Walker finished with 9.9 fantasy points and a half PPR. Like that's not going to win you any week really, and it's probably going to be a running back 20 to 25 ish. Okay, but Christian Watson has elite upside, and as we saw last week, Jerry Jeudy also hits the upside. Brett Rippon, in the game where Brett Rippon started, Jerry Jeudy, I think that was against the Jets in week 7, 7 for 96, 13 fantasy points. He finished as the wide receiver 19. And then Jerry Jeudy also last week with Brett Rippon playing part of the game, 8 for 73, 3 touchdowns, 29 fantasy points. He finishes the wide receiver 1 overall. So there's some rapport, it seems, with Jerry Jeudy and Brett Rippon. I don't think that Jeudy is going to quite get into, the wide receiver 1 overall again. But that's why I think I'm going to go with Christian Watson, because Jeudy probably figures in to be like wide receiver 15 to 20, whereas Christian Watson has been a top 10 wide receiver each of the last 4 weeks. And I don't see Romeo Doubs as a reason as to why that would stop. Elijah with Wilson is different, though. I agree. I'm not as bullish as I was yesterday on Elijah Moore. I'm still like trying to galaxy brain and sift through like, what are the possible scenarios? How high of a risk? Where should I rank him, et cetera, et cetera. So just keeping that in mind. Okay. Follow up. Also have T Higgins bench. Would you play T Higgins over Watson or Jeudy this week? I would not do that right now, or at least this week. Yeah. With Jeudy and Christian Watson, I wouldn't do that there. Yep. Sarah, appreciate you jumping in. And if you're new, you haven't subscribed and you like my content, make sure you hit that red subscribe button. It really helps the channel continue to grow. All right. Omar Rios, since Elijah Moore has Wilson throwing to him, would Alec Pierce or Paris Campbell be a better flex option in Minnesota? Man, y'all are asking me the hard-hitting questions. Let me lean on some of the data to help me answer this question, because as we know, the Indianapolis Colts have a really favorable wide receiver matchup against the Minnesota Vikings, because the Vikings give up the most receiving yards to wide receivers. So you're having to think that there's got to be someone more than just Michael Pittman going off, right? So let's look at the Indianapolis Colts and their defensive matchups. So Pittman is projected to get Sullivan for 9 snaps and Dantzler for 15 and Peterson for 16. So he's got some good matchups. It looks like Paris Campbell is going to play the majority of his snaps against Sullivan in the slot. Okay. Whereas Pierce is going to play about half his snaps against Dantzler and Peterson. So if I'm looking at that, I'm interpreting it as the better matchup is for Paris Campbell, but not by a lot. Actually, it is a little bit more than what we're thinking, but I've been burned by Paris Campbell. Right now, he is the consensus wide receiver 46. Paris Campbell has finished no better than the wide receiver 34 each of the last 3 weeks. And he had a nice little stretch there where he had 3 of his 5 games as a top 11 fantasy producer. But then like 6, 3, and 5 targets. Philly's a tough defense. Pittsburgh's a tough defense. Dallas, tough defense. I wonder if we get back to Tennessee, Jacksonville, and Las Vegas, all really cush matchups. And I wonder if this is going to be a Paris Campbell game. So let's go with Paris Campbell out of the slot over Alec Pierce. That's how I would go. Lincoln was here. I'm doing a dynasty startup draft next year. 12-team superflex, 2.5 tight end premium. Josh Allen, Fields, Kelsey, AJ Brown, but I won't draft until the 7th. Did I shoot myself? Depends on what you gave up to get those players. Like I did, I consolidated in the startup last year with Allen and Herbert. Like I got the 101 and then the 102 went on the block. And then I ended up trading my second, third, and then like a first round pick or something to move up to the 102 to get Herbert. And that was a mistake. I was a middle of the road team that was hurting for depth. And I also, missed out on a couple key wide receivers, and Cam Akers busted a few times for me this year, and Antonio Gibson busted a few times. So it depends on what you gave up, but Lincoln was here. Those are some really solid players. I would I would be okay with that start in a 2.5 tight end premium. Since Zach Wilson is starting, would you put Olave over him? Olave is a really plus matchup. Let's talk about Olave for a second, because Chris Olave right now is my wide receiver 16. He's the consensus wide receiver 18 per Fantasy Pros. The Atlanta Falcons have allowed the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. They're the 4th best matchup for a pass DVOA. There is a 26% pass block advantage that the Saints have over the Atlanta Falcons projected by PFF. So, like, are we talking super flex Rage Rod? Because I would start Olave and super flex over Zach Wilson, even if it's the Lions matchup. Call me crazy. Call me crazy. Maybe that's a crazy take. You tell me in the chat. Engram or Njoku full PPR. We are the Fractal Rain. We are going to go Njoku. We are going to wear the Njoku crowns on Saturday night. We are going to wear them. Yes. Plus, I don't know if I'm going to do a live stream tomorrow night. I've got my staff Christmas party, so I wanted to get in as much for y'all as I can. The matchup though is just so good for David Njoku, and the matchup is so bad for Evan Engram. The Dallas Cowboys give up the fewest tight end fantasy points on the season, and it's a negative 22% advantage per PFF. So I am very much leaning David Njoku over Evan Engram. Engram is the consensus tight end 9. He's one of the players I wrote up in my fantasy data article. If y'all want to check out this fantasy data article, I'm posting it right here in the chat so y'all can check it out. But I write about how I put those exact players in there. The higher ranked player, David Njoku. The lower ranked player, Evan Engram. So y'all are thinking along the same lines for sure. Thomas Dodson, what's up? We talked about playing Dobbins the other day over possibly Zeke or Barkley. Are you still feeling it? I played Metcalf and wasn't happy. I have Lamb and AJ Brown, and AJ Brown opponent has Hill. All right, well, let me see. I've done some adjusting to the rankings since we last talked, Thomas. So let's take a look. And of course, these don't get set until the games start on Saturday or until 1 p.m. on Sunday. So I'm going to keep messing around with it. But for right now, I have it running back. This is tentative, but running back 10, J.K. Dobbins, running back 11, Ezekiel Elliott, running back 12, Saquon Barkley. So there we go. That's my feel for right now. Let's see. What question do we have about? Oh, also, yeah, you're not feeling great. Okay. Thomas, what about Juju? I don't know. Olave over Garrett Wilson. Yeah, I'm probably going to move Olave over Garrett Wilson. It's just too good. No Sign Lawrence is good to go for Jacksonville. Jackson, yeah, this is a bad sign. I don't know if it's no sign. He is officially questionable. He was a limited participant in practice on Friday. Lawrence was. He was not able to log in any full sessions this week. He is the consensus quarterback 9 this week. That doesn't make sense to me. I've moved him down to the quarterback 13, and I feel like I'm not low enough. We've seen some spike weeks for sure from Trevor Lawrence. He finishes the quarterback 1 last week against Tennessee. He finishes the quarterback 5 in week 12, quarterback 8 in week 10, quarterback 7 in week 7, quarterback 4 in week 6, quarterback 4 in week 3. We've seen spike weeks from Trevor Lawrence. This is not it. The Dallas Cowboys give up the 3rd fewest fantasy points, and they are the most difficult pass DVOA matchup per Football Outsiders. I would be looking elsewhere if you were thinking about starting Trevor Lawrence. Like, I would go with Matt Ryan. I would go with Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, Justin Fields over Trevor Lawrence. Okay, let's take a look. Zach Wilson is playing. We think Knight will be used more. If so, looking at him over Kirk in the flex, I have Kirk, Cooper, and Garrett Wilson. I would start Knight over Cooper. That's how I would do it, because Christian Kirk is going to get volume. That's one of the things that I'm trusting with the Jacksonville Jaguars offense is the amount of volume that Christian Kirk is going to get. Let me pull that up here. Yeah, so Kirk right now is the wide receiver, 22 in target share. He gets 24% of the targets. He's targeted 27% of the time when he runs a route. So, and he runs almost 90. He plays 90% of snaps, 86% route participation. So he's mostly full-time player. His target share is just too high to ignore. Cooper has been dealing with the injury. We know that Deshaun Watson has been struggling as of late. Watson, I don't anticipate is going to throw for 40 something attempts. So I'm not going to go that way. And I'm predicting a breakout for David Njoku. Plus, last time that Cooper played Baltimore, he did not have a good game. He finished outside the top 36 of wide receivers. So I'm not going that way. Okay. Woody Dantzler. I don't know if that's the player I was referring to. I don't think that was the player I was referring to. Cameron Dantzler. That's the right outside cornerback for the Minnesota Vikings there. Music Biz Marty. So yeah, there you go. My last draft pick was the 302. Won't draft again until the 704. At least he got some studs near the top. That's pretty good. Telugu Mekalu. I hope I pronounced that correct. If I didn't, I apologize. But from YouTube, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you jumping in. Allen is a risky start in the snow. Cousins over Allen. I still wouldn't do that. And I get the concerns about the weather. But if it's going to be weather, then it's going to be a lot of Josh Allen running. And Josh Allen running is pretty nice. And Miami already gives up the 5th most fantasy points to the quarterback position. They're the 11th best matchup in DVOA. It's not going to be the passing that does it for Josh Allen, which is pretty nice. Because the Buffalo Bills have a 28% disadvantage pass blocking wise projected by PFF. That's how I would do it. And as Daniel, you mentioned in the later in the notes, you're right. I had mentioned it earlier on why we're fading Adam Thielen. We're not going to go with Kirk Cousins in this tougher matchup. The Indianapolis Colts, they are one of the stingiest against opposing wide receivers. In fact, they allow the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. That is why you're fading KJ Osborne. You are fading Adam Thielen in this game. Justin Jefferson, you're going to start Jefferson. They're like, don't get cute, but maybe we do temper expectations in this Minnesota-Indianapolis game. Daniel Keenan, appreciate you jumping in from YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you jumping in the comments. If you like the content, I ask that you subscribe. If you don't like it, keep commenting. Give me some crud. It's fine. I appreciate you jumping in, though. You got a question. Alec Pierce, Chris Moore, DJ Chark, Jerick McKinnon. I need one wide receiver and one flex. I know it's sad, but huge league. Thanks. All right. If I'm picking one of these for the flex, it's going to be Jerick McKinnon. Right. The running back won from last week, and he finishes the running back 16 the week before, and he gets Houston. There's just a lot of factors. Like, he's shown it to us in the past. He's got a good matchup. You know that Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs, want to continue to win. And so they've leaned on Jerick McKinnon as a trusted part of this offense. Pacheco, I'm also firing up as a mid running back too, but you want to be starting Jerick McKinnon. You're not really starting DJ Chark. He's probably the one to get the Sauce Gardner treatment. Like, if I'm betting on who's going to get Sauce Gardner, it's going to be DJ Chark. So that leaves you with Alec Pierce and Chris Moore. And, I think I have Chris Moore over Alec Pierce. Chris Moore over Alec Pierce because the Kansas City Chiefs allow the 4th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. You're bumping up Chris Moore. I think that we're going to move. move DJ Chark down. We're going to move Chris Moore up, and that's how we're going to do. Okay, cool. What's the better side? Fields, AJ Brown, Lamb, Zeke, Barkley, and Njoku? Whew. Okay, Thomas. Versus Mahomes. Okay, so Mahomes over Fields. Tyreek Hill over AJ Brown. Lamb over Juju. Zeke over Aaron Jones. That's one that y'all might want to debate, but I think I'm going to go Zeke over Aaron Jones. Henry over Barkley. And then this week, Njoku over Andrews. So it feels like I gave Hill. It's Juju over AJ Brown. No, I'm not doing that. So wait. Okay. So I'm going Mahomes, Tyreek Hill on the one side, and then Lamb, Zeke, and then Henry, and then Njoku. So it's split 50-50. You're welcome. So the tiebreaker here for me is going to be how I view the quarterbacks, because quarterbacks tend to score the most points, right? And Fields, although I have him ranked lower, like Mahomes is this is a negative matchup, surprisingly. You're like, wait a minute, Bradley, what are you talking about? Mahomes versus Houston? Yeah, at least from a fantasy perspective. From a real life perspective, the Chiefs are going to crush the Houston Texans. Let's not get too galaxy brained out of our minds, okay? But this is the crazy thing. The Houston Texans give up the second fewest fantasy points to the quarterback position. And you're like, wait, why? Why do they give up so few fantasy points? And it's because they give up so many against the running back. They give up so many fantasy points because opposing teams just run down their throat. They don't need to pass. So there's no reason for Mahomes to throw for 4 or 5 touchdowns if they're just handing the ball off to Isaiah Pacheco or dumping it off to Jerick McKinnon. So I think that Fields has an interesting upside, especially if the Philadelphia Eagles get out to a large lead against the bad Bears defense, and then Fields has to get into comeback mode because he doesn't have Claypool this week. He doesn't have Darnell Mooney. Cole Kmet is the number 1 receiving option. Equanimous St. Brown might be the wide receiver 1 for this team. It's gross. So I would lean Fields with the possibility of a shootout upside. I wonder what the over-unders are for those games. Okay, so the Chiefs and Texans actually 49.5. So that's pretty high. That's looks like the highest on the week. Yeah, it's the highest on the week. And then the Bears get the Eagles. Where did that one disappear to? 48.5. So they're neck and neck. But the differential for the Bears is 8.5 points versus the Houston Texans 14.5. Vegas is expecting this to be a blowout in favor of the Chiefs. That just means handoffs for Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon. That's how I would do it. Okay, so I would go with Fields with the potential upside, especially for the rushing. Indy's tough on wide receiver. Absolutely. Agree with you there, Daniel. 10 full PPR, Chase, Kirk. You need 2 flexes, Watson, Moore, Zonovan Knight, Damian Harris, Njoku, Okonkwo. You know, I really don't put tight ends in my flex plays unless it's tight end premium. I have Njoku over Okonkwo, but I like Okonkwo this week. I would rank Christian Watson and Zonovan Knight over Damian Harris and the other 2 tight ends. That's how I would do it. So Christian Watson, Zonovan Knight are my 2 picks in PPR there. And, guys, I just want to remind you, be like Daniel here. He's new to the live stream, new to the podcast. He likes a lot of the stuff that's going on. He's just subscribed. So make sure that you are like Daniel. And if you like the content, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Daniel, I appreciate you subscribing, and I appreciate everyone else who's jumped into the live stream, asked their questions, hit that subscribe button. As I said, we're growing the channel. It's been a lot of fun this year. And in the off season, like, I want you to be tuned into some of the takes and some of the preparation. Right now, I have 6 teams in the BBM3 quarterfinals, and it's because of some of the strategies that I was able to pick up and practice and do live stream drafts. And so those are some of the things I'm going to do in the off season. Like, I'm also going to do some live streams where I do mock drafts as well. And if you are subscribed, like, I'll just drop the link in our community link, and I'd love for y'all to jump in and I look forward to doing those types of things in the off season. So turn on your subscription, turn on the notification, actually turn off the notifications until the off season, because for those who are new, what I like to do is download this entire thing and chop it up into like 20 different videos based on the questions that y'all ask. So that way I don't just have one piece of content from this. I have like 20 or 25 pieces of content from this live stream. So some people have been like, I've seen that they've unsubscribed because they turned on the notifications too. And then they get like 20, 30, 40 notifications when I upload the videos. You can turn off the notifications until the off season. But during the in season, like, just make sure you hit that subscribe button. It really, really helps the channel continue to grow and gain traction. You know how the algorithms work. So, it costs you nothing. That's the nice thing about the subscribe. So if you like the content, hit that subscribe button. Nico and Cook are out. I agree with you. But, the one pushback that I would give, and the Kansas City Chiefs do give up the most fantasy points, or some of the most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, but the individual matchup per PFF is not as favorable. Let me go down to Chris Moore. Per PFF, he has a projected 19% advantage against his majority Kansas City matchup, cornerback matchup. Let me pull that up right now. No, I don't want Kansas City. I want Houston here. So Chris Moore is projected to play the majority of his snaps against McDuffie, but then he also gets L'Jarius Sneed, who's projected for 8 snaps against Chris Moore, also Jay Williams on the outside. So all of those are 34% advantages or below. And just for reference, the PFF advantage is from 0 to 100, where 50 is the average. So Chris Moore, all of his advantages are significantly below average. So I'm just tempering my expectations. I don't think that it's going to be like last week where he turns he has this enormous game. I do think he gets a significant target share, but he probably doesn't do as much with it. Daniel asks or says, I just thought A. Pierce was going to have a good game playing mini. Plus he has 8 targets versus Dallas. Yeah, he might have 8 targets. Alec Pierce has just been so inconsistent this year that I think that's my pushback on Pierce. He is the second most points allowed. At least the Minnesota Vikings give up the second most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. But I'm also going to lean on, PFF here as well. And it looked like that Alec Pierce had a really, really tough matchup. And his wide receiver cornerback matchup against all defenders is 12.6%. He gets the majority of his snaps, it looks like, against Patrick Peterson. And Patrick Peterson has had his ups and downs, but he's still a veteran. And, Alec Pierce, looking at the games that he has spiked, where is he? Yeah, looking at the games that Alec Pierce has spiked, he hasn't had, he was wide receiver 14, week 13 against Dallas, but still 4 for 86, 8 targets. That's not too bad. But before that, we hadn't seen a top 44 performance from him since week 6 against Jacksonville. So I just can't trust it. I think it's the level of trust. And then what PFF is telling me as well, I would rather lean on Paris Campbell based on the matchups, but maybe I'm wrong. Like I've missed on Paris Campbell for a few weeks. I missed on Alec Pierce when I thought he was going to hit 2. So I think it's going to be hard to pin down which Indy wide receiver, but if I'm leaning one way, it's Paris Campbell slightly. Adding to the previous question, Leo Alex, Chris Moore or Allen Lazard? Yeah, so Allen Lazard right now is the wide receiver, consensus wide receiver 32. I have him at 39. He's finished at least at wide receiver 39 2 of the last 3 weeks, and he last finished as the wide receiver 8 against Detroit in week 9. Now he gets the LA Rams, who aren't really a plus or minus secondary matchup, but they are a plus matchup when it comes to giving Aaron Rodgers time in the pocket. And that's why I want to be bullish about Christian Watson, because the Green Bay Packers are projected to have a 43% pass block advantage per PFF. That is one of the highest on the week. And I don't know if we've got news about Aaron Donald. I'll have to check my IDP notes on Donald, but he didn't play in the last game. And we could see that, if it wasn't for the coaching for the Vegas Raiders, Aaron Donald officially questionable for the Monday night game. Come on, load. There's no update as to whether Aaron Donald is going to play. But even if he plays, you wonder how much he's going to play, if he's going to be limited, et cetera, et cetera. So, I am going to be lower than consensus, but I don't know if I'm going to get to Chris Moore. Man, oh man. Y'all are really into Chris Moore this week. And I don't blame you. He had a good week 14, and that's going to stick in your brains. But the concerns I have for Moore are matchup based, and I wonder if we're going to be proved wrong there. I mean, I think y'all have convinced me to move up Chris Moore. He's the consensus wide receiver 46. I have him at 44 right now. Because I don't know if I can start Chris Moore over Michael Gallup is the issue. Like, Gallup has a really, really good matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So maybe we start Chris Moore over Drake London. Maybe we start him over Darius Slayton and Adam Thielen. Yeah, let's try that out. As Daniel Keenan points out, Houston is really tough versus wide receiver. I don't know if they're tough. Their coverage metrics are atrocious. If you look at PFF's coverage grades on some of the Houston defensive backs, they're positive matchups. It's just that there's almost no volume against the opposing wide receivers against the secondary. So, yeah, Houston, tough against wide receivers is a misnomer. They just don't give up a lot of fantasy points, which is a different way of thinking about it. Daniel asks, is Dulcich a better start than Okonkwo? I know Brooks is out for Tennessee, and Sutton and Wilson are out. Yeah, so I need to, I think, move up Okonkwo. Chig Okonkwo is the consensus tight end 14. I have moved him up a little bit. I think I need to move. What the heck happened with my rankings? Sheesh. I had like Evan Ingram at 15, and he was now back at like 10. So I don't understand what had happened there. But Chig Okonkwo, I moved up to 12. Dulcich, I've moved up to 9, and I feel like I'm too low on Dulcich there because Arizona allows the most fantasy points to the tight end position. But Dulcich has a negative 38% advantage versus the Arizona linebacker matchup. You have to like the volume that Dulcich is getting, though. He's gotten 8 targets each of the last 2 games, and especially with Courtland Sutton being out and Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy was almost ejected from the last game very early on. So that's I have Dulcich over Okonkwo, but I could see very easily, like, they're in the same tier. Dulcich is 9 for me. Okonkwo is 12. Knox I have at 10, but I might move him down once we get more clarity on the weather. The but the Miami Dolphins allow the 4th most fantasy points to the tight end, and so do the Detroit Lions. The Lions give up the 4th most as well. They're tied there. So I wonder if we can like talk ourselves into Chig Okonkwo as a top 10 option this week. We'll see where the dust settles for these Saturday games, but ultimately, I think you're going to lean with Greg Dulcich over Okonkwo in this matchup. Thomas from YouTube, something random. I just dropped Jared Goff. I have Fields for A.J. Dillon. My opponent has Aaron Jones, kind of a defensive move, just in case Jones has an issue. Sure. That sounds fine. I'm okay with that. That's a good move, Thomas. And A.J. Dillon, he would be a solid handcuff. He's one of the better handcuffs out there. Chris Shoemaker, you think return of Romeo Doubs cuts the points down for Christian Watson? I don't think so. Like, it's going to be mostly Watson on the outside. I think Watson has earned snaps. I think he's earned snaps. If you look at what Christian Watson has done over the past few weeks, I mean, you have to be happy with not only the scoring, but also the snap share. Since week 10, Christian Watson, 85, 82, 94, and 92% of snaps. So yes, I think that Christian Watson will be just fine, even if Doubs rotates in on the outside. I think the existence of Romeo Doubs is going to more impact Allen Lazard. So maybe that's what we're talking about here. Can we talk maybe in that context about moving Chris Moore over Allen Lazard? I think that would be a reasonable reason. Okay. Romeo Doubs taking over for there. So let's make that move here. Yeah. Chris Moore over Allen Lazard. I like it. Okay. Clamped EZ from YouTube, Engram or Dulcich. I'm going to go with Dulcich for this week. And it's that he gets Arizona, which is a plus matchup. Dulcich has 8 targets each of the last 2 weeks. And I know Engram went absolutely hog wild, but Engram gets the Dallas Cowboys, and the Cowboys give up the fewest tight end fantasy points. It's a negative matchup versus his linebacker. Primary linebacker matchup. And Evan Engram has finished, we've seen some spike weeks from him for sure, but we've also seen some scary weeks against Baltimore. He finishes the tight end 50, against Kansas City, the tight end 27, against Vegas, the tight end 39, against Philly, the tight end 50, against the Chargers, the tight end 35, against Washington, the tight end 26, against Kansas City, the tight end 27. So there is a really, really scary floor for Evan Engram. And I don't think that floor exists, or at least the risk of it is very low given Dulcich's involvement in the offense and the lack of, other weapons. KJ Hamler's on IR. Tim Patrick has been on IR all year. Cortland Sutton is out, and now it's up to Jerry Jeudy and Greg Dulcich. Give me Greg Dulcich over Evan Engram. Well, I've answered all the questions. If y'all really liked what you heard tonight, make sure you hit that red subscribe button. It really does help the channel. You can follow me on Twitter at FFStalder. My article for Fantasy Data dropped, and also earlier this week, my full-time fantasy article dropped. And then I'm also going to have to get some top prop fantasy time in here in a little bit. So I appreciate all of you jumping in and asking your questions. This has been a lot of fun. Y'all know that I love this, spending time with y'all on Fridays and Saturday nights if possible. I don't know if I'm going to do it tomorrow night because of the games and also because of my staff holiday party, but I appreciate all of you jumping in. And we got a Hail Mary question from Chris Shoemaker. I'm down 29 already. My opponent had CMC. My backs are Mixon, Miles Sanders, McKinnon, Jamal Williams. Which two? Okay, let me pull it up. Let's give some of the context for these players. Joe Mixon right now gets Tampa Bay. They're a tough run defense. Miles Sanders. Wow, where did Miles Sanders go? Oh, he's the running back 8. You're starting Miles Sanders for sure. Against Chicago, allows the 4th most fantasy points to the running back position. And the Philadelphia Eagles have a 65% run block advantage. There's no way you're not starting Miles Sanders. Absolutely. And then McKinnon, Jamal Williams. Look, I've moved Jerick McKinnon up to the running back 20 for this week. And I feel like that is too low, but it's also a lot higher than my peers. Jerick McKinnon has finished as the running back 16 each of the last 2 weeks. He's had in each of those games at least 10 touches, and he just gets space in the field. And if he falls in the end zone, that's really interesting to me. Could the floor be scarier? I think sure. But looking at 4 of the last 6 games, Jerick McKinnon has finished as the running back 28 or better since the bye week. So, and Jamal Williams gets the New York Jets. That's a really tough defense as well. I think for ranking's sake, you're going to put Joe Mixon over Jerick McKinnon. But again, it would not surprise me at all if McKinnon outscores Mixon. So you're starting Sanders and you're starting Mixon. But I agree, the wild card is McKinnon against Houston. I just don't think I have it in me. I don't think I have it in me to tell you to play Jerick McKinnon over Joe Mixon. Let me do a little deeper dive here in a second. Let me look at some other stats, see if I can sway myself one way or the other. Let's see. The Cincinnati Bengals have a negative 12 run block advantage against Tampa Bay. Yeah, that's not great, but it's also not atrocious. It's just not ideal. Yeah. The consensus for Joe Mixon is running back 11. So I am lower than consensus. I have Mixon at 13. But I don't know if I can get all the way down to even splitting the difference of like McKinnon at 16, Mixon at 17. I don't think I can do it. Chris, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can do it. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And Chris is saying I was going with Sanders, just wondering if I should pull Mixon for McKinnon. Basically, coin toss. I think you're still going with Joe Mixon. The consensus is there for him. He finishes the running back 17 last week in his first game back from the concussion. Yeah, I think you're going Mixon. Yeah, and 0.2 for carries. That's the deciding factor. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Until next time, good luck with your Week 15 Saturday matchups.
I embrace all this risk, I'm insane. Talking about that best bill, I'm the best rest till into the next world. Guess I got next still. Best bill, I'm the best rest till into the next world. Guess I got next still.